Really excited. Okay. Yeah, really excited to introduce Dr. Gregg. Dr. Gregg's coming to us from the University of Utah. Where he's an associate professor in neurobiology and genetics. Dr. Gregg has been involved in a lot of really sort of pioneering work. It's too many awards for me to list. It's time. But highlight the things that are really important to everyone here in Calgary, which is that he's a graduate from the University of Calgary to start.
Thank you for the support.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of our alumnus out making good, and he from here went on to Harvard, involved in developing some really important pioneering techniques in RNA-seq and other tools and technologies that many of you are learning about, have learned about. And also, want to note a lot of involvement, lots of entrepreneurial spirit in this guy. As Chief Scientific Officer in several companies, including Storyline, which I think we're going to hear about here, and other scientific advisory roles as well. And I always believe I should get out of the way as quickly as possible. So with that, I'll invite Dr. Gregg to come on up and speak to him.
Hey, Dave, thank you very much. And for those of you who made time to attend this either virtually or in person, I'm really grateful for the time you made. Dave filled me in on the program here, the precision medicine program, and I have to say I'm pretty passionate about it. It sounds extremely unique and it sounds incredibly important. For the past 20 years or so, I've done basic research, and I've always dreamed of translating a lot of that work into the real world to improve things out in the real world, but it is a very difficult process. It's a unique skill set, and it's really awesome to see a program that's focused on that problem specifically. I'm going to talk about my own personal adventures in closing that gap from basic research to trying to deliver something that works and operates in the real world by talking about this startup company called Storyline Health. And please stop me, and I'll try to keep an eye on the screen for online questions, as well as obviously in-person questions, as they come up. This is a very difficult and challenging and interesting road. So first of all, we've established a mission for Storyline Health. And Storyline's mission is to understand human behavior and make that knowledge useful for everyone. That's kind of what binds us when we make decisions around the technologies that we're building, the problems we're trying to solve, and the resources we're trying to build. That's what we think about the most. And it has a lot of broad implications that can be used in a lot of different ecosystems, in medicine, in surgery, and even in places completely that I never even thought of in the legal system and other areas. It's taken us on all kinds of adventures. Very, very cool. So, oh, how funny. I tried this many times and no, it's not advancing. Oh, let's see if we can figure out why. Okay, we had a problem, but now, I've solved the problem. Okay, that was not the problem I was intending to talk about. When starting down this road, there were a number of problems that I was particularly interested in. One is that acute care solutions. You come into the doctor and and it's sort of this acute event, and you get treated for something that typically does not resolve your healthcare problem if it is a chronic illness, right? So some of the biggest illnesses that we're trying to face, Alzheimer's disease, which is the most expensive problem in the United States right now, Parkinson's, cancer, autoimmune diseases, et cetera, they involve so many different factors: the immune system, inflammation, genetics, developmental factors, mental health, social support, and more, that a single acute visit really isn't enough to resolve the problem. The other thing that is a really clear problem and difficulty in medicine is that we don't have maps to navigate healthy aging, and then the onset of diseases at different sort of stages of our lives. And without a map, you can't really navigate very rationally. You can't detect adverse events early. You can't diagnose in patient important subtypes as effectively as you need to. you can't predict progression or treatment responses nearly as effectively or accurately as you need to. And all of this kind of adds up to an overall problem where we're locked into reactive care instead of predictive care, where we resolve problems before they progress and become chronic illnesses that are very expensive and difficult to manage. It's not just in the clinical care setting that we have some problems. We also have real fundamental problems in the research ecosystem. Now, I know I'm going to pick a few fights here, but bear with me because I have a lot of experiences trying to solve problems with some of these tools. Genomics is a wonderful tool, very powerful. It's the backbone of the precision medicine ecosystem, but frankly, it's not very predictive and it's not very diagnostic. And the genome sequence, as I often say, that you are born with is the genome sequence that you die with. It doesn't change if you change your diet, have an infection, have a stressful event in your life, or get sick. Just because I have risk factors for depression or mental illness doesn't mean that I'm going to get that next week, right? And in fact, if you look at some of the best polygenic risk scores we have for many of these complex diseases, like major depression, they only explain less than 1% of the variance in the risk for that disease. That's a real bummer, right? The other thing that's very challenging is that some of the diagnostic tools that we're using, especially in behavioral health, they were developed through kind of subjective approaches. They're not data-driven in the way that some other tests that we use in medicine are. And so people have argued that the DSM-5 diagnostic categories, for example, are too broad. They're too simplistic, and that's a barrier to research to uncover mechanisms, biological mechanisms that we can target and treat different subtypes more effectively. Animal research. Now, I'm giving another talk on Friday that's on animal research, so this is going to look like terrible hypocrisy. But animal research, at the end of the day, well, it's very powerful for uncovering basic biological mechanisms and for understanding mammalian biology, vertebrate biology, et cetera. It often does not translate to humans. 95% of the drugs that we get working well in preclinical trials ultimately fail in clinical trials and don't actually become medicines. That means that we really need to study people. Medical records are the backbone of the information that we have for patients, right? These EHRs, there's lots of different technologies trying to make use of that more effectively, but ultimately they really weren't ever designed for precision medicine purposes, data science, and they don't capture real world data outside of the clinic. And then wet lab tests. Now, these are very exciting tests, these molecular tests that we rely on and the new ones that are coming, but I often call them second line tests because they're not massively scalable. These aren't tests that you can take every day or every week or every month and be monitoring and getting a picture of your overall health. The microbiome, which is something that I'm very excited about, but it's not likely that we're going to be mailing our poop samples in every week to get regular microbiome checkups. So these second line tests, for example, they are second line, these wet lab tests are second line tests. And as I was thinking about some of the problems that we're trying to solve, there's many problems in the United States where I'm located right now. But there are also major opportunities here in the Canadian healthcare system, as many of you know, in this precision medicine program. Healthcare in Canada ranks as among the most expensive systems in the United States, but we really struggle with the wait times. And as a consequence of these wait times, it is having an impact on patient quality of life. Acute illnesses become chronic illnesses. There's pain and suffering and mental health, job loss, economic damage, huge opportunities for smart young people who are creating precision medicine technologies to help to solve these problems, improving access. So all of this really folds into one big problem, I think, which is that we need massively scalable precision medicine research and care solutions. And there are only a few things I think that can address that need in the world. And I'm going to tell you my opinion. So my opinion is that the human nervous system offers one of the best solutions that I can see. if we look across all of the different technologies that seem to be emerging out there in the world. And, if you kind of step back and think about it, the nervous system of our body is the ultimate precision medicine system, right? All of these nerves are innervating different organs and tissues at the cellular level. They're detecting metabolic changes, endocrine changes, physiological changes, pain and damage, movement. All of that information rolls up into the central nervous system, and it influences cognition, fatigue, energy, motivational drives, homeostasis, and much, much more, right? So our behavior, which is kind of the manifestation of all of these signals and changes, is the expression of all of this underlying biology. So, but the problem is that we're really not making use of that data in an objective and kind of precision medicine type of way. The way that we take information from patients right now is we've got forms that they might fill out, right? How many of the past, over the past 2 weeks, how many days have you felt depressed or sad? You might say several or most days. We've got medical records. There's a face-to-face exam, right? So that takes a lot of time. And there's an expert clinician in front of you who asks these questions and is evaluating your health and your behavior and how you respond. But very little of that information actually goes into the record. It's just going into the brain of this expert who's making a judgment call. And there's so much information that we do not measure or capture. Such a huge opportunity for precision medicine. The problem, let me just say that all decisions in the medical care system start by understanding the patient. What are their symptoms? What are they experiencing? What's their personality? What social support do they have? What access to care do they have, et cetera, et cetera. But there really is no effective, trusted way to capture that data and make it objective, like a radiologist would do, right? They take a scan, they've got extraordinary capabilities now to analyze those images and pull out patterns that are diagnostic and predictive. And we don't have those technologies for understanding patient behavior. So there's a big opportunity here, but it's a hard problem to solve. And I'm going to tell you a little personal story about why I think it's worth solving. So this is me in 2018, and I'm dressed up like Dr. Evil and my head is bald, but it's not because I'm a real aficionado of Dr. Evil characters. It's because I have lost my hair due to a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. So it's 2018 and I was, diagnosed. I had too many metastatic sites in my body to count. And my diagnosis was terminal. So, I would go on palliative care. And, we'll get into some of the details. My son has, shaved his head for support. So he's mini me. And there's my wife and my dog, also very supportive. So we faced this extraordinary problem of what seemed like an incurable and impossible situation. But because of my role in the world as a PhD and a researcher, I had access to all kinds of extraordinary and interesting individuals. And I had published a paper that year that had sort of focused on why elephants don't get cancer. You think, well, it's a bit of a sideline, but elephants have huge bodies, lots of cells. If they got cancer at the rate that we get cancer, all elephants should have cancer. But it turns out they don't, they're cancer resistant. And our study was about why that happens. This kind of gave me a network of folks who were thinking in new ways in the cancer field. And so we put together a cancer and evolution meeting at the Huntsman Cancer Institute. And many of my colleagues flew in just a couple of months. It was very, very kind. Sometimes I get teary-eyed, not tonight. So, and the theme of the meeting was, how could we improve stage 4 cancer outcomes using the knowledge that we have today, right? So not generating a new medicine, new drug targets that might translate into a solution in 20 years, but how could we actually improve outcomes for patients today? And there were a number of big ideas and important lessons that came out of that meeting. And one of the critical insights was that the way we are treating cancer currently in standard of care is arguably one of the worst ways that we could approach the problem. And how do how can you say that? The reason that people think that this is a poor strategy, which I will go through in a minute, is because there are so many lessons that have been learned about attacking pests and managing pest control in the farming community and through studying of species extinction and evolution. We have a bunch of really interesting information that's out there in these other fields, but we haven't brought those lessons into the cancer world. So what are those lessons? A typical cancer patient like me comes into the clinic and they've been diagnosed with their tumor and they're put on their first line therapy. And if this is the tumor marker, so their tumor burden goes down if they get a good response, and maybe they even cross into this Goldilocks zone of NED, no evidence of disease. Then what happens is the standard of care is to stay on that medicine until the disease returns, and that's called progression. So in the United States, you actually cannot switch to a new medicine. Your insurance company won't pay for it until you've shown evidence of progression. And then you're allowed to do a new medicine. So now you go on to the next drug, and maybe you get a good response as the disease goes down, but you wait until it grows back, and then again, and then eventually the oncologist runs out of drugs, right? And depending on the disease you have, there may be several drugs or there may be very few options. And at that stage, they've lost control of the disease. So it spreads through your body and there's nothing they can do anymore to control that. A different approach is to switch drugs at the nadir of the response. And here you're working in the dark, right? Because you can't see the disease anymore if you've got a good response. But we call this extinction therapy. And the reason we call it extinction therapy is that it's inspired by how species actually go extinct in nature. When you've got a huge population of animals, very diverse, there's always going to be some subpopulation that can survive the pesticide or the asteroid, the meteor strike or the volcano or whatever, because they have some sort of adaptation that allows them to make it through. But if the population is small and sparse, then that is the only opportunity you have to eradicate that group. And you just have kind of relentless pressures that you apply to the system. And so this is the idea of extinction therapy. Instead of waiting for progression, we switch it the nadir, and you just keep doing different drugs. And I switch drugs every 4 months. So this is my actual tumor data. This is a tumor marker called CA2729. And here I was initially diagnosed with reasonably high tumor markers and started down this idea that came out of the meeting for extinction therapy. And by the second drug, adriamycin, I was in the NED zone, and I was NED by PET CT as well as by tumor markers, and stayed, though, switching different drugs. So I never stayed on the same drug until the disease came back. I never went off all of the drugs, which is sometimes the recommended thing in standard of care if you reach NED. In addition to that, I put together a program that would switch my metabolic states in combination with the drugs. So now we're talking about drugs plus metabolic and behavioral interventions together. The metabolic switching program involves a few weeks of being on a low-carb paleo diet, and that has particular functions for metabolic and microbiome and immune repair, a ketogenic phase, an extended fasting phase, which is a 3-day water fast, and then a low methionine diet to recover. And if you're interested in reading about the science behind this, I published it in a special issue of Cancer Evolution and Frontiers. So bringing that whole program together, now you can couple the drug strikes in different metabolic states. And so you imagine all of these different tumor cells, like a single tumor has about 2 millimeter squared tumor has billions of cells, and they're all very diverse. Some of them are amino acid metabolizers, ketone metabolizers, and many of them are on the Warburg effect, and they're glycolysis and glucose metabolizers. And so by putting yourself in different metabolic states and then coupling the drug strikes with those, you can pick off different populations of tumor cells. That's the idea. And here's my tumor marker data again. And here I'm going on a very aggressive treatment of an anastrozole and Ibrance, and then a capecitabine and oral Cytoxan, and then exemestane and Verzenio. They're all very difficult drugs. And the tumor markers are more or less stable. They're not going down. And then I went off all of my drugs and did that program that I just described and got a 23% reduction in my tumor markers. And so by this metric, the metabolic switching outperformed the drug treatments, at least at this stage. And so this was encouraging to me because it showed for me the power of manipulating metabolism to affect cancer. And of course, now we think of cancer as very much a metabolic disease. And so this makes a lot of sense. And subsequently, there's actually been a lot of studies on the benefits of fasting and other things for treating cancer. So now we have a picture of a better care pathway potentially for advanced cancer, but I'm just one person. And I've had success with this and been able to manage my disease for over 3 years. And, you know, just for reference, the median survival for patients with that disease is 3 years. So I've been NED for that period of time. And the proportion of patients that ever managed to reach NED with my disease is only 6%. So it's very rare in and of itself. So this makes me encouraged, and I want to get it out there for other folks. What this means is that we need to think differently from not just the drug, but actually to this care algorithm, where there's a sequence, a combination of different drugs that need to be put together with diet and metabolic changes. And there's this very kind of complex program that needs to be delivered. And try to imagine how this will work in the future. It's very easy to run clinical trials where the solution is a single drug. You get the drug and you get the sugar pill, and then we measure the results at the end. But when the solution is a complex care pathway, how do you get that out into the world as a discrete entity that can be run in clinical trials reproducibly across different patients? And then how do you optimize it in a kind of precision medicine ecosystem where you need to modify the diet or the sequence of the drugs in different combinations for particular patients, right? So it becomes kind of a personalized intervention. We need to start by understanding the patient. And we need new precision medicine platforms and technologies that are focused on that problem. So this comes back to the behavior problem. And then once we put these care pathways together as algorithms, we need to be able to deliver those at massive scale in a way that people can follow them, right, through their smartphone. They need to be able to access these and the diagnostic and the monitoring tools through their smartphone remotely. Can't be commuting regularly into the doctor. It's too much trouble. It's too much of a burden on the patients and their quality of life. There's a lot of education that goes into this. So you need to be supporting the patients so that they understand why they need to do these different steps. Why do you need to eat certain fruits during the low methionine stage? Is it just because apples are good? It's not because apples are good. It's because they have absolutely no methionine in them, right? And so there's this key bits of information. They need the right information at the right time to make its way through that. And then you need to be monitoring the patient, right? So we need new tools to monitor and get ahead of any problems. And all of this complexity needs to be safe, needs to be easy to use, and it needs to be massively scalable and improve outcomes. And I'm telling you a story from cancer, but you can imagine the same problem for Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, diabetes, kidney transplants, anything, right? There's a huge opportunity to solve this. So this is too big of a problem for one goofy guy like me to take on, of course. And instead, what we decided to do was build a platform to help other people, like you guys, identify these problems and have access to all the tools that you would need to go out into the world and solve them. Build companies based on them, build apps based on them, solve any particular problem that you would be interested in. So that became the mission. And I have a partner in this mission. So there's me, and I've got this background in genomics, and we published this paper using artificial intelligence to decompose complex patterns of behavior. So we had some kind of 10 years of research working on that problem. And I kind of brought this research component into the organization. And I met Jeff Barson, and Jeff is the CEO of Storyline. And together this combination of skills that we were able to bring together is very unique. And so as you guys are thinking about the organizations and the companies that you want to build, finding partners that have these extraordinarily complementary sets of expertise can be such a huge advantage, right? It's fortuitous. It involves kind of a lot of networking and talking to people and helping, getting in a program where they can get you to meet people with these different skills. But making these partnerships is like critical. And out of all the technologies and all of the things and all the ideas that you come up with in your company, the most valuable things that will be in your company or in your organization will be the unique set of experiences, talent, and understanding that the founders and the leadership have. So the people that you bring on board, that's the most valuable resource in your startup. Jeff had run a series of medical clinics, so he understood medical clinics. He had built a telehealth platform called TeleDoc, which is pretty successful company. It's been through a few different names over the years, and one of the leading telehealth software platforms. And then he led a innovation at the world's largest AI company for job hiring called HireVue. And so if you're going to get a job driving an Uber or something like that, one of the first steps in that process is a video interview. And then AI analyzes your facial, vocal, and speech patterns and predicts whether you're going to be a safe and good Uber driver or Delta Airlines employee or one of these massive entities that needs to hire people effectively and safely. So Jeff had seen that AI was being used for analyzing behavior in this ecosystem, and we could see that we could learn a tremendous amount from that and lift it over into the biomedical research and care community. So repurposing some things that were working in another area and bringing it into this world was really a big part of our secret so far. So we founded Storyline, and we compare ourselves, to the other technologies as you're kind of evaluating your startup and whatever value you're going to bring into the world. It's good to kind of think about what solutions are out there in the world. We've got questionnaires and wearables and X-rays and MRIs and expert clinicians and fMRIs and all that kind of stuff. And some of these are, diagnostically very effective, but very expensive and not very scalable. Others are very cheap, but they're not very diagnostic or predictive. So they're not very information rich like a questionnaire. And what Storyline's aiming to do is work in this area where it's very cheap and very, very scalable, but it's also very, very valuable and rich and useful and predictive diagnostic data. So we work, I will sometimes say that because I come out of this genomics background and modeled Storyline very much on Illumina. And when I was at Harvard, Illumina invested in me and started my career. And, I thank God to Illumina many times, but I learned a lot from them about how to solve many problems in big data. And so we modeled Storyline very much on them. This is a screenshot of the interface. And so if you were to set up a professional account because you're a researcher, clinician, or an entrepreneur, you'd log into Storyline and you'd see your dashboard. And this is where you would manage all of the products that you're going to build within the platform using AI. And this is the part of the platform that's called programs. And essentially what you can do in here is build an app. And you can build an app for a care pathway, an AI-supported care pathway, for whatever problem you want to solve within minutes. It takes hardly any time at all. And you can deliver educational content, video, text, and more. There's all kinds of questions that would be typical for REDCap or other questionnaires and things like that you can plug in here. And then there's the video question. And that's what we'll see is where all of the data and the value really comes from. So this is, there's much to say about the platform, but this is one of the key components, right? So you can design care pathways, educate folks, communicate with them at scale. It enables all of the AI tools that I'm going to talk about here in a minute. Assess, subtype, monitor, research, diagnose, etc. And then you can, once you've got that app built, it's yours, right? You have built and invented something, and now you can get it out into the world at massive scale and start to help patients. And this is what I really want people to do with this platform. When you do that, what happens on the patient side is they get a note and they click on the link and they're taken straight into the Storyline app. And now they can do these asynchronous interviews over their phone. So you'll ask a question, how are you feeling today? The person will respond. It videotapes their response. That video is moved off their phone and securely stored in the cloud in a HIPAA, GDPR, military grade security data storage solution that is designed specifically for this. I wanted patients to have control over their data. And so patients always have control over their data within the Storyline system. If they want to delete it, they can delete it. And I know that that gives entrepreneurs and innovators kind of a bit of a heart palpitations, but I can tell you that that is the way the world is going for sure. People need to have control over their own data. Once their video has been moved up into the cloud, then you have some real superpowers. We've built a microservices pipeline of many different AI algorithms. And all of the algorithms are put together to measure over 30,000 different micro features now. I know the slide says 20,000, but it goes up every week. So I got to update the slide. From the video, we get information like objective measures of pupil dilation, right? Which is regulated by sympathetic tone. You can see eye tracking, and I'll show you some examples of how we use this for neurological assessments. Head movements. You can see blood flow patterns of blood flow changes across the face by measuring RGB values across 400 different points on the face. You can look at respiration responses, micro expressions and micro movements across the 40 different muscles in the face. And then it's not just the motor components or even the pallor of the skin, but you can analyze speech. And so word choice, all the natural language processing algorithms here have been put in place to go from speech to text. And then you can analyze what people say, the structure of their sentences, personality traits, speech patterns, even filler words, ums, ahs, pauses, and how they articulate their responses, the sentiment of their responses, and what they're trying to communicate. And it's not just what you say, but how you say it. And so there are thousands of audio measures, harmonic ratios, energy in the voice, and pitch and tone changes, volume changes, etc., pronunciation. And you can detect a number of different things here. Emotions in the voice, vocal microtremors. There's entire companies built just on the voice for diagnosing different disorders. And all of that power is built into all of this ecosystem. So I'm pretty excited about that. Coming from the genomics background, where when we sequenced genomes, we could not just print out the 3 billion bases in a big book and give it to people. We had to create file formats to deal with this, to share it, to study it, to research it, to integrate it in other multi-omic studies. And those are called FASTQ files, right? SAM files, BAM files in the genome world. We had to develop analogs of those for the behavior world. And these are called story arc, story time, and poem files. Unlike the genome, there's a dimension of time, right? So you've got these thousands of measures that you might pull out in a particular part of a video, but then all of these have to be built out in time. And so these are actually, these poem and screenplay files are massive data files. And they can be brought into whatever kind of multi-omics precision medicine ecosystem you're thinking about building. if you're collecting genome data, microbiome data, immunome data, whatever, you should be collecting this type of data as well as integrating it into your subtyping and studies. Once you have this data, you can do all kinds of things, research the data, discover subtypes, phenotypes for different patients, discover symptoms, and you can also train models that become biomarkers for abnormalities or difficulties. We'll talk about some examples. And then what Storyline enables you to do is to build visualizations of those models that make it very easy for your customer or your doctor or whomever, even the patient, to interpret and understand and use the information. And then once you built one of these things on the platform, we recognized right away that we needed everybody to be aligned. So if you build a model on the Storyline platform, you build a care pathway for liver transplants or whatever you're imagining, you can publish that in the Storyline library. And that's like an app store, like an Apple app store for healthcare AI algorithms and care pathways. And then immediately that is available to everyone throughout the world through telehealth, and they can pay you for it. So people are actually building their startups. They don't need to train all the models and build all the software and the permissions and the data storage solutions and this privacy and the safety problems, et cetera, et cetera. It's already solved on Storyline. You can go straight in, build your care pathway, train your algorithms, publish, and have a product you can take out into the market.
Just a question from the online audience.
Oh, yeah.
The question is the AI extraction base sensitive to racial or ethnic differences?
Yeah, so that's a really, really important question. And there's a number of different answers there. So one is that some metrics are very sensitive to skin tone. There are challenges with people who have really, really black skin in getting enough contrast to measure some of the facial movements and dynamics. Folks with lighter skin tones, we're finding that all of that works really, really effectively. Some algorithms and the speech and the text components, if you have accents and some of these other variations in speech patterns, can introduce errors and difficulties. And so whatever you're building on the AI platform, you have to be very cautious of the types of biases that you're introducing, and you need to understand what those biases are. So what we've done at Storyline is to build a bias report. Let's say you collect data from like 1,000 people and you bring it into your ecosystem. Right away, if your model is picking up on, let's say you're diagnosing depression, and you've built a model that is diagnostic of depression symptoms. You'll test the model, right? You'll train it, and then you'll test it. And we will see whether there is a bias in your results for particular racial groups or accents. And that will help you to diagnose problems within your ecosystem. And then you need to work through that, to be honest. There is not going to be a single algorithm that solves every problem for every group of people. Super important question, whoever put that up, thank you. One of the things that I learned from the genome medicine revolution is that one of the big mistakes they made is allowing everybody to become siloed. What that means is that every institute or every researcher, the researchers are the worst. So they would build these little sort of empires of data and not allow anybody else to touch the patients, right? And they would have their whole career and they publish papers based on these patients that only they ever had access to. And you can imagine like how frustrating and difficult that is. Very good for that person's career, but very difficult for the whole exercise and problem in general of improving medical care and diagnostics. If all genomes had been shared initially, so there was a way to integrate the data for all genome sequences as they came off of an Illumina sequencer, we would be 100 miles ahead of where we are right now. Right? Data integration and sharing would have moved us miles faster. And so what we've done at Storyline is try to correct this problem. It's very difficult to correct, but we're trying. where it's one ecosystem, right? So there's the research and people are launching their research projects and things like that. The data can be de-identified and it can be shared into a common platform. And that's really powerful. By contributing to that, you really are creating something that can move your own research much, much more quickly, right? Because if you're trying to train an AI model for, let's say, depression again, you're not just trying to diagnose depression from healthy, you're trying to diagnose depression from bipolar, from mania, from subtypes of depression, from alcoholism, from, all kinds of things. So to ever get good models that are effective and accurate, everybody has to work together. So the platform has to be designed from the ground up with that in mind. And then once these solutions are built, they can be immediately piped out into the real world, right? When I was diagnosed with cancer, it felt good to write papers, but how futile, right? To write a paper and have it published, and hardly anybody reads it, right? There's 7,000 papers published every month. Nobody reads that stuff. So you really need to renovate the whole biomedical research system so that the research and the discovery is immediately and seamlessly piped into the clinical world. All of that data just flows. Any questions? I'm going to get into a few case studies. I wanted to show you guys sort of how people are using this. Yeah.
So to capture the data, we're using the smartphone with video.
Yeah.
Are we using some of the wearable data points as well?
What we're going to do is we're going to be able to integrate wearable data. So let's say you have a problem that you're trying to solve, and part of it has wearable data. What we can do is the wearable data is going into a data repository. Storyline, through an API, hooks into that repository and pulls your patient's data into the same Storyline ecosystem. So all of these wearables and other devices can be very easily and seamlessly integrated into the Storyline system. Does that make sense? So it can all be pulled in. Storyline itself is not focused on wearable type of data. We're focused specifically on this video captured smartphone interview type of data. Yeah. Any other questions? And if anybody online has a question, something came up, but I'm not sure. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I just, on the chat, I just put this program I used last year, Neuro.ai. I don't know if this is something similar, but that essentially, on your smartphone, you can sort of map out your face, and then it collects, I don't think as as sophisticated data as Storyline, but it has a good baseline. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I haven't heard of it. Thanks for sharing. I'll check it out.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. I'll just put it on the chat. It's yeah.
Yeah, I see it up there. Yeah, thank you. And Neura. The AI field is fast moving. I have to say it changes by the week. So I'm always grateful for new information. Yes.
Hi, sorry. You were about to move to the next slide there, but I got. So I was wondering then just about the kind of integrated platform that you were talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know if I got this right, but it seemed like you were saying how, for example, as a data scientist, I could maybe look at all of the data that has been collected.
Yeah.
I train my models on.
Yeah.
And then the files would be in the format of the story
arc, story time.
Yeah,
yes.
Poems. So is that accurate?
That is accurate.
Okay. So
yeah.
Then,
if you want to do that, let me know. Yeah.
So then my concern or a problem that I would be wondering about is, for example, if I wanted to know about depression, then I would have all these features like these facial expression, etc. But then how would I know the predictors?
Yeah, the labels.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I haven't got into labeling, but Storyline has a whole labeling ecosystem within its software. And the data, within that data sharing ecosystem, we retain the labels. So there's the other approach is an unsupervised approach, right? And that's actually one of my sort of favorite but most difficult applications. Yeah.
And I guess kind of connected to that would be, since you talked about FASTQ files, the FASTQ files I think would be kind of a bit easier to anonymize just because,
Yes.
but with this, if you're kind of publishing so much information about their behavior and their facial expressions and even their speech patterns, is there any concern or how do you deal with?
It's a huge concern for sure. And we have kind of a de-identification process that goes through a number of steps. So the first is to scrub. So we have an algorithm that goes through and all of that speech to text data, right? If they say, you know, my name's John and my wife so-and-so is like driving me crazy, right? That's personal information. That will all get scrubbed by the algorithm that goes through the speech to text. So all of that personal information, address, local, you know, et cetera, is scrubbed. Then there's the facial data, right? And the facial data is not high enough resolution the way that we presented in story arc and story time to reconstruct a person's face accurately. It's good, but it's not designed for that specific problem. And the added thing that we can do to even further anonymize that information is just dimension reduction. So then you're, you know, inheriting kind of a reduced dimension feature set. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah.
Shoot online questions.
Oh, sure.
I see them this spring.
Oh, good.
How do you define behavior? It seems to go beyond the social definitions, or what is the breadth of attributes?
Yeah, what a great question. So, you know, the definition of behavior in this case is anything you can record on a video of a person. So you're absolutely right. It's a bit of a narrow term in this case, because your app might record, you might ask people to take a video of their surgical wound, right? And that's the data that you capture in your Storyline app, and you're trying to monitor inflammation or something like that. We've had people that approach us because they want to look at skin health, right? Like bags under the eyes, how much people are sleeping, acne, and that kind of stuff. And that's not behavior, that's, you know, skin. So you're right, the term behavior is a bit narrow, but it's a big component of this. I hope that answers the question. Anything in video basically is of use on the Storyline platform. The other question is, I'm curious how Storyline might support engaged feedback with patients and care partners along with clinicians and researchers. Yeah, really, really important thing. So you can use Storyline literally to have these kind of asynchronous conversations with your patients or study participants, where they can leave you a video message that you watch, or staff at your clinic watches. You can obviously just send them a little quick questionnaire like, are you doing okay? Are you finding that this is working okay? Are you happy with my care? You know, whatever the questionnaire is going to be. But you can also do this through video and asynchronous video messaging. Yeah. And then the other question is, how do you sort verbal variables, word choice, sentence structure, et cetera, for patients for whom English is not their first language? Yeah, so that's a really, really good point. And this comes into the problem of bias. For folks who have an accent because English is not their first language, you know, on the data science side of things, you need to be able to think about that and solve that problem within your ecosystem. And what we aim to do is give you all of the data that you would need to do that. Many of the AI algorithms that exist in the world work pretty well for for English speakers. Spanish is getting pretty good. And there's a number of different platforms that are coming with really good speech to text for many, many other languages. So we're getting better and better. The problem is the intersection between, right, where you've got a thick accent and you're speaking language that's not your native tongue. So it's a good question. Another way to answer that question is that when you're trying to build an AI model to diagnose something, you want a lot of redundancy in the features. You don't want everything to rely on one feature that might be contaminated by accent. So you've got other measures of, blinking rate patterns, for example. If you look at folks with treatment-resistant depression, their faces are flat and they blink very slowly. So you not only get information out of the voice, but you get a lot of other information that's redundant. I hope that's helpful. These biases are, so there's two ways to look at the biases. One is like scary problem, right? But the other is huge opportunity, because if you're out there collecting data and you can identify these different subpopulations of people and build algorithms that are useful, that's personalized medicine for particular subgroups. So it's think of it as an opportunity to go out there and get the data and solve the problem. Yeah.
So this might be me misunderstanding like the lengths that AI can go, but
Sure.
How did you meet with experts on conditions to build those feature profiles?
Well, what a good question. So yes, the way I by far not even close to being an expert in any of these different domains, right? We're going to talk about a lot of different stuff: cancer, depression, psychedelic treatments. We're doing so many different, homelessness and addiction. So the way it has to work is Storyline builds the platform, and then we partner with people who are experts in a particular domain, and they go out and figure out how to apply the platform in their area, right? Because they understand the problems, they understand, the subtypes and what sorts of features and measures and assessments might actually be useful. In many cases, you can take an assessment that's already being used, like animal naming, which is, kind of a cognitive test that's been used for a long, long time, and now just deliver it as an AI kind of thing. And now you get all this new information as somebody tries to name animals over the course of a minute. And the phenotypic patterns are actually quite striking and interesting. Yeah. Okay, so, and this is going to speak a bit to your point. So this is, I'm going to just tell three examples. One example is neurology. So the way neurology typically works right now is you've got a person that comes into the clinic, they presented with symptoms that bother them enough in their life that they've now come in to see a physician. And that neurologist does a workup, typically takes an hour or more, and goes through, and they're assessing different things and making expert judgments around phenotypes, abnormalities, et cetera. So the problem that Fanny, who's an outstanding neurologist and researcher at Mount Sinai in New York, she has taken on using Storyline, is that neurological disorders are incredibly diverse, and they're frankly frequently missed or misdiagnosed in the primary care setting. Primary care doctors are not trained to detect and diagnose the over 400 different neurological disorders there are in the world. But these disorders really benefit from early detection. And so we want to be able to make, assessments of neurological disorders more scalable, readily accessible, and available for people to get diagnosed early. So Fanny seeks to build a neurological burden index, where the objective is just to say, are you kind of showing some symptoms that look a little abnormal compared to the population of people that is in your demographic? And then if so, maybe, this is an alarm that would drive you to go into the clinic to seek care. There's the supervised problem, where we've got over 400 known neurological disorders, and we'd like to have an objective smartphone-based assessment that says you've got this versus that. And then there's the one that, I'm a researcher, is the one I love the most, which is the unsupervised approach, where you collect massive amounts of data and you discover new neurological disorders that nobody even had names for. Right? And so Fanny's approach then is she's set up on Storyline, and she's built a 15-minute integrative neurological, psychiatric, and clinical psychology assessment. And then she delivers that to people's smartphones, captures the data because they do the assessment. I'll show you how it works. And then from the data, the idea is to discover these important phenotypes, train diagnostic models based on the labels for different phenotypes and subtypes, sometimes quite rare neurological disorders, validate those models, and then make them available for everybody to use worldwide through telehealth. And it's so easy to enroll people, they can just take a picture of the QR code on their phone, and that will take you straight in to download the storyline assessment, and you could do a neurological assessment on your phone right now. And yeah, it looks like somebody's going to go for it, so great. Okay, so now here's what it's like. So the neurological assessment, what I think is so cool about this, it's asynchronous. People are watching the clinician tell them what to do, and they're just following along, right? You can never do this with a questionnaire. Oh, hold on. Oh no, what's up? Oh, I know why. Hold on. Hang on. The video is not in the PowerPoint here. Can folks on Slack, or excuse me, on Zoom see the? No. So maybe I just need to share. I think this will work, right? Okay. And I have to.
Raise your eyebrows once. Stick out your tongue all the way. And smile a big smile.
Okay. So that would go on, for 50 minutes or whatever. You feel like you're having this face-to-face assessment, and then what we can do with AI models is we can do very precise tracking of all of the motor patterns and movements in the face, right? So this is me. I'm looking up, looking right, looking left, looking down, like you would in a typical neurological assessment. And then microexpressions and changes in movement and things like that in the face are being measured. And across all of these different points in the face, that data is being extracted in XYZ coordinates and then architected into those story time files. It's not just the face that we can analyze. So we can do essentially these full kind of clinical interviews, but capture a lot of different data. So here's me, and it's measuring over 400 different points across my face. So all microexpressions and movements. It's also capturing the RGB values. So we're going to get information about skin pallor, skin health, and potentially perfusion patterns across the face. Motor tests, so in neurological assessments, they'll often have these types of little motor assessments. All of this becomes measurable and quantitative instead of just a kind of judgment. And, I'm just doing it at home. So if I don't have to come in from the country or whatever to get access to the care to the major center. And that's good for early diagnosis, right? That's the goal there. So once you have this type of data, you can do dimension reduction and project that data into multidimensional space. And here, even though the data is captured in 2D on the video, we can use AI models to estimate the 3D projection of the data. And so you're seeing somebody's microexpressions and movements there being projected across all these spots. And we're just plotting the data as we move through the video frames. And each frame has, we've just done PCA on the data to kind of reduce it. And then you can follow the changes to microexpressions and movements through this dimension reduction. Very, very cool. So neurological assessment becomes highly, highly quantitative. Like I said, one of my favorite pet projects is not supervised learning, but actually unsupervised learning, because this is where you get the opportunity for discovery. And so some of the data scientists in in the group have really been focused on improving unsupervised learning algorithms. And here is an example where they've made synthetic data where there's no, if each dot is a patient, you can imagine here, and you've captured thousands of measures for each patient, so it's high dimensional data. And then here there's really no subgroups, and then we gradually create subgroups. So we've got a ground truth, right? And now there are real subgroups coming out in the synthetic data. And what Jared on the team has done is he's tested some of the different unsupervised learning algorithms that exist in the world against his own storyline cluster test. And what this shows, this is the in-group proportion test from Rob Tibshirani at Stanford. And his test, you know, as you move from not real clusters to lots of really coherent clusters, it sort of gradually improves, but it's not very sensitive. Don't tell Rob. So, and then, but Jared's test is beautiful. It really scales nicely as true biological subgroups emerge in the data. The score comes up beautifully with the coherence of that data. And so he has a nice algorithm, I think, for finding bona fide subgroups from this high dimensional data. So as you collect lots of data from different patients, you can subtype and discover subtypes in new ways. That's cool in my world. And you know, I always come back to my roots in genetics, where we still think about liability thresholds, where you've got a certain number of genetic mutations in your genome, tips you into this clinically relevant tail of the distribution, right? So these liability thresholds, and we can start to think about behavior in the same way, where you gather many, many different measures, and there's a certain number of abnormal kind of behavioral features or neurological symptoms, and it tips you into this kind of clinically relevant realm. Okay. I'm over time. Is it okay? Yeah, okay. Thank you, all of you, for, you know, not going to the hockey game. Thank you. This is a project that is, you know, it's one of those big missions, right? And in Canada, we're pretty good at taking care of people, right? You know, I'm really proud of that in the home country. But the United States, it's a little different. So in the United States, you know, 2.5 million people are incarcerated. Many people are homeless. They do not have, in many cases, the same social infrastructure to help people. And so there's a huge need in the world to help folks. And really, it's going to be a technology solution that does this. And I'll talk about, you know, the details here. So this is a partnership between the National Institutes for Jail Operations in the United States, Last Mile, which is an organization that helps folks coming out of prison get jobs and transition and reintegrate into the world, and Seek Haven. And Seek Haven helps folks like vets and people living on the street get off the street, get homes, get stable, and if they're suffering from addiction and things like that, recover. So this is a huge, huge social medical problem in the US. You know, for those of you who've been to some of the cities down there, there are huge cities of tents and people living on the street and things like that. They have more mentally ill people in the jails than in the hospitals. So they're essentially using the incarceration system to take care of the mentally ill down there. 64% of inmates have clinical mental illness symptoms, 2.5 million incarcerated people, and suicide is the leading cause of death in these jails and prisons. And then 500,000 people are homeless. And, you know, like I said before, one of the challenges there's a number of challenges here. One of the challenges is that the folks that work in the jails, they're not psychiatrists. They're not expert clinicians. They are getting paid $18 an hour as prison guards, and they have to make very stressful decisions every day that they're at work, right? They're dealing with a very, very high stress environment. There's a lot of turnover in the staff. So even though you get somebody who becomes an expert and becomes really good in the position, somebody just gets arrested and they know what to deal with them, how to house them, how to take care of them so that they're safe, and they burn out, and then there's a new person that comes in. So we really need better solutions to help manage decision-making in these ecosystems. And one of the challenges and one of the opportunities here is that because so many mentally ill people are in this ecosystem, we can start to understand mental illness more objectively and find different subtypes. And so this is an example of a company that has been built on the Storyline platform called Rubicon AI. And that's their mission, is to help the jail and the prison systems make better decisions. And they're partnered with the National Institute of Jail Operations to do that. And basically what they're focused on right now is they built a 15-minute intake assessment. So police pick up somebody off of the street, they drop them off at the desk at the jail, and they drive away. The person sitting there behind the desk has no information about this individual. They don't know what substances they might be addicted to. They don't know what mental health issues they may be struggling with. But at the same time, they need to bring them into a very stressful environment and make sure that the whole thing doesn't explode. So they have built a little intake assessment. And then their first mission is to solve suicide and suicide risks. So within the first 72 hours, there's a reasonably high suicide risk among folks that get arrested. And they're trying to train an AI model to predict and identify people at high risk. And those people will get special care and treatment. They need to validate that model, and then they need to deploy it at massive scale for use by jail and prison staff. So they have got a workable solution in place. This is what their interface looks like. Storyline sitting on the back end, capturing, analyzing the data, and then it's presented into the front end to help to build suicide scores, suicide risk scores that are easy for the prison staff to interpret. And these are active in jails right now in Utah. And so I'm just going to finish, my talk talking about cancer, which is where we started. One of my dreams is to take this technology and use it to support cancer patients and improve outcomes. And this is a collaboration now with the Huntsman Cancer Institute, the Moffitt Cancer Center, which just got a $750 million injection of cash from the Florida state government. So they will be one of the largest, if not the largest cancer center in the world. Arizona State University and the Huntsman Mental Health Center. One of the things that surprised me as I became a patient and learned more and more about the disease is that it's not our genetics that are the primary drivers in the risk for getting cancer, we think. Genetic risk factors are actually, and genetic forms of cancer, are pretty rare. Leishmania, BRCA1, BRCA2, pretty rare causes of cancer, actually. Overall, it's actually behavioral factors we think that play one of the biggest parts. Smoking, alcohol consumption, right? Bad lifestyle, bad diet, social support, nutrition, stress, treatment compliance, exercise, all of these components add up to affect risk for cancer onset later in life. And like I said, cancer is now thought to be a kind of immunometabolic disease. And so a lot of these environmental and behavioral factors can impair metabolism and immune pathways. And this means that this is kind of a complex problem to solve, but behavior is the problem to kind of get in and help. And it's a place where nobody's focused. Most of the cancer research efforts are focused on the tumor, right? Sequencing tumors, epigenome, genome, understanding immune cell infiltration into the tumors. This is where most of the research is focused. There's a huge opportunity, I think, to focus on the patient and patient behavior. And so one of the things I've done is build this cancer patient masterclass online, building a community of patients and providing them with the tools to understand themselves and their disease. One of the things that I found as a cancer patient is just having an understanding that what I was doing was making things better was incredibly motivating. Even though it's very hard to do a lot of these lifestyle changes and behavioral interventions, if you can see the results, it's incredibly motivating and it gives you something to work towards. The AI tools that Storyline provides can help people to see the improvements. Fatigue is improved, mental health is improved, skin pallor and coloration is improved, muscle tone, et cetera, et cetera. So we can build these scores that help to support the patients and help to drive them towards better outcomes and better actions. I described the extinction therapy approach, and God bless them at the Moffitt Cancer Center, where they think a lot about these types of strategies. They have got a donor who's going to support a pilot trial of the extinction therapy regimen for metastatic breast cancer starting in the spring. And so that program of drug switching and metabolic switching will be put together into an algorithm that will be delivered through Storyline, and we will see if it works for other patients. And the metabolic switching paradigm will also be tested in a trial at the Huntsman Cancer Institute in the new year. So that's very exciting for me. And it's a very exciting opportunity to see what types of patients do well through this type of program. What types of patients struggle with particular components? Can I diagnose and see which patients are going to struggle with particular parts early and then provide them with special support to help them get through the whole pipeline and program? Man, that'd be amazing, right? And then if you can provide that support at scale through a smartphone ecosystem, so it's not face-to-face care providers, it can all be provided, at massive scale. That's a dream, right? Then you really can move the needle for a lot of people. So what I've tried to do today is tell you the story of building a solution for a problem that we think we've identified in the precision research and care world, which is around human behavior analysis. And we feel like there's an opportunity to make that more objective and data-driven and precise, and then integrated in a lot of different aspects of medicine and medical care. And of course, the goal, as I described, is really to build the platform so that other smart people can use the tools really to move very, very quickly to solve problems that they understand deeply. So, behavior data is incredibly rich, useful, and powerful, and easy to capture. So you can capture it at massive scale on a smartphone. This will be a frontline diagnostic, right? I talked about the second line molecular lab tests, very important, but getting something out on the front lines that is massively scalable and powerful, I think, is a real opportunity. Decisions always start from patient symptoms, behavior, mental health, expression, and what they kind of look like. So there's an opportunity to make that measurable and objective. It is a predictor of outcomes. And it's now, I think, ready for prime time in biomedical research in a lot of different areas, many of which I haven't even thought of. So we're aiming to support this conceptual shift from just thinking about drugs and drug development to building these more effective care algorithms and care pathways. And, I don't know, it's limitless, but there are really hopefully useful applications that come out of all of this work. And if you have any questions about what was it like to build this? What were the problems that you encountered? Data security, blah, blah, blah. Just email me and ask me. You guys are embarking on all these cool adventures to build and solve precision medicine problems. I'd be delighted, to share my experiences in war wounds. It's very hard. Very, 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 very hard. It's like, imagine how hard you think it is and then multiply that by 100. It's so hard. And working in the Canadian healthcare system has a lot of wonderful benefits, a lot of amazing opportunities, but it's very hard to innovate within this system. And so you guys have to go in really tough. My brother is a surgeon here in Alberta, and he, over the course of his career, faced many challenges and frustrations with wait times and difficulties providing the care that he wanted to provide. But he's finding ways to build private clinics, to open up entrepreneurial opportunities that increase access to care for folks in Calgary and Alberta. So, it is going to change. Just keep pushing. Yep. I'm done. Thank you. Sure.
The good old question, what is the cost?
Oh yeah, so the starting cost is the best cost of all. It's free. And then as you scale up, I think it's $99 a month or something like that, and then $3.99 depending on the number of accounts and the amount of data that you want to process. And then, if you want to grow some massive entity where you're capturing enormous amounts of data, then we have these sort of enterprise scale solutions or partnerships or opportunities to bootstrap. Everybody wants you guys to succeed, right? Like we want whoever works with the platform to win. So hopefully that's helpful. Lots of flexibility there. Can this platform be beneficial and used by researchers who are building research products, apps, or is more so for business? I actually perceive it more as a researcher-based tool. I think of it very much like genome sequencing, where, right now everybody's sequencing stuff on an Illumina sequencer, and you're capturing all this wonderful molecular data. Why not capture rich symptom and behavioral data that you can intersect with that kind of multi-omics work? So please consider it for your big research projects, consortia, all that kind of stuff. And it's compared to most of the things that you're doing in the lab. I run a lab, so I know how much it costs. This is really cheap. It's really, really cheap. I laugh because we sneeze and we spend like $1,000 an hour in the lab, and $1,000 to get you really far in Storyline. If you'd like to provide, good, thanks. Yeah, costs. So on the website, if you go to the website, you can sign up for free and get an account right away, and you'll see the other costs. Is the cost dependent on the services that Storyline would provide? Sort of, to be honest, right now it's mostly a subscription-based model. So not so much like turning features on and features off. Mostly like get a subscription and you have the keys to the kingdom. Yeah, kind of thing. Yeah.
Is there the ability to capture more of the musculoskeletal movements like joint angle?
Oh yeah. All of that's there. So, nobody's doing this on the platform, but the algorithms have been built. So cool. Like, I always wonder about people doing yoga and things like that. Like, if you can pick up on interesting movements. But of course, there's also neurological assessments, like you're evaluating Parkinson's or tremors and walking patterns, et cetera. It's all built. So if you want to do that, we can collect the data and, yeah.
Going back to Dr. Fanny a lot.
Yeah.
Let's say that a patient had done this that she built, and now how does that information get in front of her, and how does that help her save time rather than create more tasks for her?
Interesting. So imagine Fanny's situation where imagine the future, right? So Fanny's situation today is somebody comes into her clinic and she doesn't necessarily know what's wrong with them. If it's Alzheimer's disease, it will take an hour and a half to diagnose that. There'll be a series of exclusionary tests that need to be done to work through, I forget, is it vitamin D deficiencies? I forget, but there's all sorts of things you need to rule out to get down to likely Alzheimer's diagnosis, okay? Takes her an hour and a half. Now, if the person could just do that assessment in 15 minutes, we measure 30,000 different features and we can get a model that's 99% accurate or 95 or 90% accurate for that diagnosis. When the patient comes into the clinic, Fanny's way ahead of time, right? And so she doesn't need to spend necessarily an hour and a half on that problem anymore. She might move straight to second line tests, blood tests for amyloid, order scans, whatever she decides is the next course of action. There's the time saving on her part. Now, so this is the clash of the Canadian versus the US healthcare system. In the Canadian healthcare system, you want improved efficiency because having many more patients come to you just clogs the system and causes a lot of problems. So you want improved efficiency and you want to get more patients through effectively and safely. In the American healthcare system, you're a business. You want more patients to come to you, worried that they have neurological health problems. So if you can get early diagnostics out there on the market that help to capture prodromal Alzheimer's, you're pulling them into your ecosystem where you can run $3,000 MRI scans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I mean? So, yeah, so that, two different worlds, right? Yeah.
The incentives of it.
The incentives are completely different, right? Yeah, yeah. So you can have these CLIA approved tests that you get out in the world. And the idea is just to help to inform and get early diagnosis for all kinds of things. Yeah. Yeah.
How you guys storyline validate your diagnosis based on this behavior? Like if there is any differences, like how you guys do that? How you know that this diagnosis accurate?
Yeah, yeah. So the way that process works, it's kind of the same in any kind of test that one's developing in medicine. It's always starts with an expert clinician. And typically if you can, you get multiple expert clinicians. So somebody comes in and they've got a diagnosis of depression, and you might get 3, 4, 5 psychiatrists that say, I agree, this person is not this, it's not that, they have depression. So that person gets accurately labeled. And this is why it's so expensive and challenging to build these algorithms, is now you've got a ground truth data set of folks that have real, everybody agrees on depression. And your first job is to build an algorithm that matches those clinical experts and gets a certain accuracy and generalization error that's acceptable for that. Does that make sense? So that's where it starts. Now, the reason I'm excited about unsupervised learning is that, let's say depression is a fairly broad diagnosis. You throw a whole bunch of people into that bucket, and then you apply an unsupervised learning algorithm that clusters them out into subgroups. That becomes an exciting new research paradigm, right? Where you've got these new subgroups and you follow them over time, and maybe one group responds very well to a particular dose of a particular SSRI, and the other group is treatment resistant to everything until you give them psilocybin. And then, bam, that's the solution for them. Or it's, hopefully not, but ECT, whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
2 questions in the chat.
Yeah.
Chris,
Is the overall anonymized data within Storyline available to play with and overlay to identify insights and opportunities? So Krista, great question. Yes, I can do that. I understand, I'm a scientist, you want to play with it, right? See what it's good for. Is it possible to use data generated by others in the program? Yeah, so that's the solution for the API thing, where there are now these API ecosystems, and if you're gathering data on an Apple Watch in your study, or you're gathering Fitbit data, or rings and things like that, you can pull that into the ecosystem through API calls. Yeah. Awesome questions. You guys are you're on it. Pretty cool.
We have just a few minutes left. Oh, go ahead. Oh.
Yeah, they can't hear questions.
Yes. I don't.
I can hear you. It's okay. And
Right. So about that slide with the unsupervised learning and how you got the clusters, the more features you added in. So I wanted to just kind of, I was curious about what kind of features you're just adding in. Is there like a paper on that?
No, there's not a paper. I'm the bottleneck on writing that paper. So yeah, we have not published the algorithm that does that yet. I want Jared to test it in a few different ways before it's like ready for prime time. But yeah.
And so you haven't, I'm guessing, really found out about any insightful differences between these different clusters there?
No, so at this stage, all of that was done with synthetic. Means that we made it so it's a ground truth set, different parameters and resolutions of clustering. So really want to understand how these statistics forms We've got different things on top. I think right now, thousands of people in this. And so it's a lot of simulation. And then the next mission is to apply it to things neurological.
That's good.
Should be pretty.
Very exciting stuff.
Asking great questions.
Can I tack one question on here?
Oh, somebody couldn't hear me. Can you hear me now? Okay. Sorry for that.
Okay, I'll just ask one question that occurs to me, and I'm wondering about your vision for this going forward. It strikes me that there might be a real opportunity also for a new kind of engagement as a patient with the kind of platform here, right? You know, you described this care pathway that you kind of built. And so I wonder if you have a vision of like, using this as an application to allow, individuals even to kind of get in there and customize their own journey, right? Their own plan, their own pathway, maybe swap in and out. Is this something you've thought about? Is it a vision future for you?
Well, first of all, it's a really cool idea, right? Because there are patients out there that want to be able to build their own little care pathways and be able to measure their, changes or whatever. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. I know as a patient myself, one of the biggest struggles for patients is the loss of control. You're very sick, and now you're in the hands of other folks who are controlling, very serious part of it. And I think that's what drives people to be crazy. Juice diets, not showing up to the doctor because they're going to go do acupuncture or whatever, right, to cure safety. So it's because they lose control. And so if you can enable them to have the experience of some control over their thing in a way that's scientifically rational and beneficial, it will alleviate their anxiety and honestly. I think what you're saying is really powerful. You want to do resources. Oh no, so we can't hear me. What's going on? Sorry.
Okay. Well, we're at 7:30, so thank you, Dr. Gregg again. Thank you so much for being here.
Guys, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. And yeah, thanks to everybody online, and sorry I, came in and out. Reach out if you have any questions about anything. Yeah, thanks so much for this opportunity. I really
I signed up for the